Fredrickson, Torres, Tarico, Tran, the Lions.
File item 136, SB 392. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 392 by Senator Flores, an act relating to contractors and making appropriation therefore.
Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. SB 392 by Senator Flores simply extends the ability for construction companies to organize themselves as a limited liability corporation. This bill has received bipartisan support and has moved through the legislative process unanimously. There is no known opposition. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Fuentes moves the call. File item 52, AB 1648. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1648 by Assemblymember Jeffries, an act relating to vehicles.
Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and both members. I'm sorry. There's 12. Members, AB 1648, the amendments, this is the firefighter driver's license bill. The amendments taken in the Senate are clarifying and technical in nature, and of course are double joined with the measure SB 1475 to avoid chaptering out. On behalf of Assemblyman Chesbro and myself, Chesbro being a joint author, I respectfully ask for your concurrence.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Jeffries moves the call. File item 56, AB 2060. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2060 by Assemblymember Charles Calderon, an act relating to fixed price contracts.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, members, this is a measure, when it left this House, simply provided that whenever the legislature raises sales tax, that you exempt fixed price contractors with the state. This now provides differently. It says that any time that the legislature enacts a new sales tax, any fixed price contractor with the state can now renegotiate the contract with the government. There's no cost to this bill because there is no new sales tax, and this will only happen in the future. There's no opposition to the bill. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves the call. File item 58, AB 2147. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2147 by Assembly Member Emmanuel Perez, an act relating to transportation.
Mr. Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 2147 will improve the health and safety of children in California, especially in our rural areas where we lack infrastructure. And this will ensure equitable access to safe routes to school funds. AB 2147 has received bipartisan support in both houses. I thank you and respectfully ask for your aye vote on concurrence.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Perez moves the call. File item 61, AB 2289. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2289 by Assembly Member Ing, an act relating to air pollution.
Mr. Eng.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and all three members. AB 2289 is before you for a vote on concurrence and Senate amendments. 2289 will improve the smog check program by using better technology to diagnose and address vehicle emission problems, cutting the cost to consumers. It will speed up the smog check program, reduce air pollution, and foster better training for technicians. The amendments adopted in the Senate make the vehicle testing more efficient, clarify performance standards, improve the reporting mechanism, clarify the fines and ownership requirements, and improve the appeals procedure. The bill is sponsored by the Department of Consumer Affairs Bureau of Automotive Repair. The California Air Resources Board has wide support from the health and environmental community, consumer groups, air quality management districts, and the smog check industry. The bill has received bipartisan support, has passed out of this floor previously. Respectfully request an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Eng moves the call. File item 51, AB 1640. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1640 by Assembly Member Evans, an act relating to cancer screening.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is the bill that reestablishes the Every Woman Counts program. It left the Senate with absolutely no votes on a bipartisan support, I'm proud to say. The Senate amendments remove the eligibility requirements for the program, which will hopefully, or is being discussed in the budget discussions and will be in budget bill language instead. It also adds February 1st as the date by which the annual report is due to the legislature regarding the program. Again, it has no known opposition and no votes, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote on concurrence.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Ms. Evans moves the call. File item 53, AB 1701. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1701 by Assembly Member Chesbro, an act relating to public health.
Mr. Chesbro.
Madam Speaker and members, AB 1701 will simply extend the sunset date of the Disease Prevention Demonstration Project until December 31st, 2018, which is an additional 8 years. This measure is supported by the California Medical Association, AIDS Project, Los Angeles, Drug Policy Alliance, and others. It's back for concurrence. There's no known opposition, and I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Norby.
I rise in support of the bill, Madam Chair. While this bill does involve the emotional issue of drugs and drug abuse, it essentially is about local control. It doesn't require the counties to do anything. It allows them to do what they've done in the past if they want to do it in the future. It's about local control, local responsibility, and should be left there.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Chesbro moves the call. Pursuant to Assembly Rule 77.2, I am re-referring file item 49, AB 787 Hill, to the Committee on Transportation. Mr. Calderon.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to waive the file notice requirement to allow Transportation Committee to meet and hear AB 787 on Thursday, April 26, upon the call of the chair in a room to be determined.
Without objection. File item 55, AB 1871. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1871 by Assembly Member Jones, an act relating to motor vehicle insurance coverage.
Mr. Jones.
Madam Speaker, members, AB 1871 removes an insurance impediment to car sharing. Car sharing is when people provide their private vehicles to others in a facilitated car sharing network. It allows us to reduce the number of vehicles on our streets, reduce parking and traffic congestion, have environmental benefits. Right now, if you seek to share your car, your personal auto insurance will be canceled. This bill makes clear that you can continue to have your personal auto insurance, and the car sharing facilitator will provide commercial auto insurance to cover liability while it's being shared. We've worked closely with the insurance industry. We took amendments to address technical concerns they have. There is no insurance industry opposition. There's no opposition to the bill. The bill has enjoyed widespread support, bipartisan support in this House. It passed on a vote of 75-0. In the Senate, 35-0. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 60. AB 2263, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2263 by Assembly Member Yamada, an act relating to sentencing.
Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 2263 is a simple sunset extension for 1 year that would protect California from provisions of being accused or already charged with being unconstitutional in terms of sentencing. This bill has achieved widespread bipartisan support and will enable us to bring all parties to the table to really address sentencing reform in the future. I respectfully ask your aye vote on concurrence and Senate amendments that address chaptering out issues.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Ms. Yamada moves the call. File item 57, AB 2076, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2076 by Assembly Member Salas, an act relating to advertising.
Ms. Salas.
And retain.
Okay, pass and retain. File item 62, AB 2302, clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2302 by Assembly Member Fong, an act relating to post-secondary education.
Mr. Fong.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 2302 is an important part of the transfer reform package that will streamline the process for students, save California money, and increase graduation rates. The Senate amendments revise the bill to request that the University of California to consider guaranteed eligibility for transfer admission to a student with an associate degrees for transfer, require the CSU and community colleges to establish methods to ensure all students are notified of new transfer pathways, and 3, require the Chancellor's Office of the California Community Colleges to facilitate a process that will allow students to take transferable courses at multiple community college districts. AB 2302 will be an opportunity to put students first, improve the efficiency and coordination of our higher education segments, and meet the state's workforce needs of the future. AB 2302 has no opposition and is supported by all 3 segments of California's higher education system. I respectfully request your concurrence in Senate amendments.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 52, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 54, AB 1825. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 1825 by Assemblymember De La Torre, an act relating to health care coverage.
Mr. De La Torre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. AB 1825 will require all individual and group health insurance policies regulated under the Department of Insurance to cover maternity services for women in California. This legislation will close a loophole that allows individual policies to not offer maternity services when group plans and HMOs have to provide maternity services. This bill is different from the versions in years past in two significant ways. One, the Federal Health Reform Act requires maternity services starting in 2014, so it's going to happen anyways. But significantly for this legislation, we have also taken a compromise that will have a phased-in transition period for policies issued between 2011, next year, and 2013, right before the new mandate kicks in. Women who purchase new policies without credible coverage within the prior 62 days will be subject to a one-year waiting period for maternity coverage. This 12-month waiting provision will sunset in 2014. The idea here is that they wouldn't have a pre-existing condition, namely being pregnant, for that one-year time period before the mandate would kick in. This has broad support. It has the support of Blue Shield and Kaiser. Colleagues, very important statistic. In 2003, 82% of individual insurance policies had maternity coverage in them. Last year, that number was down to 22%. A complete collapse of this market. What that means for women and their families is that they have to pay extra $200 to $300 to $400 extra a month to get maternity services. This is a good compromise measure to help us bridge the transition to 2014. I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, I must rise in opposition to the measure. While I do believe that the author's intent is well intended, it is not without notice that the use of the word loophole, I think, is somewhat misplaced. It's not a loophole to suggest that individuals may want to, in fact, embrace the idea of paying less for their insurance because they don't need specific coverage in every conceivable area. So a single man may not want to have maternity coverage for himself. I think it's reasonable to expect him to be able to pay less for that privilege. The author doesn't see it that way, and I understand philosophically we diverge here. But I don't think it's fair to characterize that as a loophole. I think it's a market-based advantage that somebody doesn't need a service has the ability to contract for it. Members, I understand why we want to make sure that in our HMO plans and our group plans we have that coverage, because we're presumptively covering a large swath of individuals, not just one person who has the ability to make an informed decision. But that's not the case in the individual market. Members, again, I respect the author and his intent, but I believe this is the wrong direction to go, as it takes away the opportunity to contract for that which an individual should, and that is the service that they need. Members, I strongly recommend a no vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. De La Torre, you may close.
On that point, I think it is a loophole. I think when federal law requires group plans to have maternity services, the intent is clear. When California state law requires HMOs to provide maternity services, the intent is clear. It is just this one small segment, the smallest segment of the insurance market in California, where maternity services are not required. And in terms of single men having to purchase it, women in their policies have Viagra coverage, have prostate cancer coverage, etc., etc., etc. It is part and parcel of the insurance compact where you pool risk among the individuals in that insurance pool. I urge your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 44, noes 11. Senate amendments are concurred in. Okay. File item 59, AB 2244. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2244 by Assemblymember Fuhr, an act relating to health care coverage.
Mr. Fuhr.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This bill is back for concurrence. It's the bill that expands insurance coverage availability for children. It assures that pre-existing conditions will no longer preclude kids in each of our communities from getting health insurance coverage, among other things, and I urge an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 12. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 67, AB 2456. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 2456 by Assemblymember Tirico, an act relating to emergency medical services.
Mr. Tirico?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, AB 2456 returns on concurrence and creates a standardized training and accreditation process for emergency medical services personnel. It will provide statewide consistency in training programs to ensure safe and effective delivery of EMS services to the public. This bill comes to this body after a series of investigational reports in the San Diego area where several EMS workers were employed without having proper background checks. Respectfully ask for an aye vote on the amendments.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 8. Senate amendments are concurred in. Okay, members, we're going to go to Senate third reading. And I'm only going to take up those files that floor managers, where you notified the Speaker's office ahead of time. If you did not notify the Speaker's office ahead of time that you were ready to take up your bill today, it will not be heard today. So the first item is file item 126, SB 1304. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 1304 by Senator DeSaulnier, an act relating to employment.
Mr. Eng.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is Senate Bill 1304. Members, just a point of interest, every year more than 10,000 Americans are diagnosed with life-threatening diseases such as leukemia or lymphoma, and their only hope for a cure is a transplant from an unrelated donor. Most patients, about 70% in need of a transplant, do not have a matching donor in their family and therefore must turn to the bone marrow registry to find a match from an unrelated donor. There are about 810,000 people on the bone marrow registry in California. In 2009, members, there were only 284 individuals who donated their bone marrow. This is an extremely small amount of persons in the state that would be eligible to take the leave allowed in this bill. SB 1304 by Senator DeSaulnier provides private employees that donate life-saving bone marrow or organs paid protected leave from their employment, up to 30 days for organ donation and up to 5 days for bone marrow donation for employers with 15 or more employees. The bill was conceived by Megan Williams in response to Senator DeSaulnier's annual There Ought to Be a Law contest after her 27-year-old daughter, Michelle Macon, passed away tragically from leukemia in 2009. As a way to relieve the burden on small businesses, SB 1304 will allow employers to require their employees to take up to 5 days of accrued sick or vacation leave for bone marrow and up to 2 weeks of earned and unused sick or vacation leave for organ donation before taking the leave allowed by this bill. SB 1304 will promote bone marrow and organ donation in California by providing paid protective leave and, most importantly, save lives.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Eng moves the call. File item 127, SB 949. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 949 by Senator Oropesa, an act relating to vehicles.
Mr. Block.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. SB 949 is intended to clarify certain provisions of the state's vehicle code so that enforcement remains consistent throughout California. Several local governments in the state ignored defined violations and penalties in the vehicle code for moving violations and punished these offenses under their own local ordinances. Such inconsistency in the enforcement of the state's vehicle code creates confusion among drivers and inhibits accurate collection of statewide data on moving violations that's used to track unsafe drivers and calculate insurance rates. It furthermore puts the state at potential risk of losing millions in federal transportation dollars. Such practices are not allowable under the state vehicle code, according to Legislative Counsel, and SB 949 will remove any opportunities for misunderstanding. The bill has had bipartisan support and not any no votes throughout the process. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 45, no 0. Measure passes. File item 129, SB 945. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 945 by Senator Liu, an act relating to children.
Mr. Jones.
Madam Speaker, members, SB 945 simply provides that upon the release of a ward from a non-foster care facility, the probation officer or parole officer assigned to that ward will give that ward a notice stating that the youth is a former foster child and may be eligible for services and benefits, and provide existing information about the availability of current federal and state programs for that ward. When a foster child that's been placed in the custody of the juvenile courts and in a juvenile hall ages out of the system, oftentimes they're left unaware of their continued eligibility for foster care programs that can assist them in being successful, getting them off the street, providing housing, providing education. Last year, I authored a similar bill, AB 921, which received unanimous bipartisan support from the legislature in both houses, but regrettably was vetoed by the governor. And Senator Lewis come back this year, made changes to that bill to address concerns of the Department of Finance, and I'm confident that we'll get a signature. I hope that we will have unanimous bipartisan support again for this measure on this floor. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, no 0. Measure passes. File item 128, SB 657. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 657 by Senator Steinberg, an act relating to human trafficking.
Mr. Fior.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In the Judiciary Committee, our colleagues who serve on that committee will remember a particularly harrowing bit of testimony from a woman who had been the victim of trafficking in labor. She was forced into working in a horrible situation. Her story isn't only hers. It's indicative of the stories of 2.5 million people who are trafficked in labor markets every year, and it's indicative of the 12.3 million people who work in some form of forced labor. This bill by Senate President Pro Tem Steinberg is designed to begin to curtail this appalling practice. The bill is very simple. It requires large companies to report on what, if any, steps they are taking to deter human trafficking. The reports would appear on a website. You might say, well, if that's all the bill does, is it enough? But it's an important first step in the state of California to allow consumers to know which companies they want to do business with and which ones they should look away from. It's important because perhaps it will create some competition in a positive way among large companies so that they are trying to lead a race to the top to limit the number of people in the world who are trafficked. California has an important opportunity with this bill, the California Transparency in Supply Chains Act of 2010, to begin to lead an effort nationwide to assure that in none of our districts are consumers purchasing goods that are a result of forced labor, that in none of our districts are manufacturers preparing goods for sale using forced labor. It's an important first step, and I urge an aye vote.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I have to rise to oppose this measure, and I'm definitely sympathetic with the cause. But as I spent hours looking at this myself as well, and the practicality of this is where does it go from here? Let me take another scenario. When we had a lot of exportation of our manufacturing goods and jobs we had here in the United States, there was a movement of buy made in the USA, buy USA goods. So everyone had a little stamp, made in the USA, put on materials, their clothes, their shoes, whatever they were buying, and people had the choice to buy that. Just like a choice to buy, recyclable goods or those type of different things. Human trafficking, although we're all against that, and we all want to do our best we can with it, I'm afraid what the remedies are here for those companies that don't comply. It kind of leads to more work for these companies and more for attorneys to look at and possibly sue or find different things to do with it through the Attorney General's office. And it's going to be additional cost to our consumers. I totally would like to push our companies to go strive for this and maybe get a seal of approval from an organization that looks at their purchasing background. But if you take this to an example like Walmart or one of these big chains that brings in thousands of different goods from thousands of different suppliers throughout the world. And it's not just those suppliers, but you also have to figure out where those suppliers that they're selling those goods to are also importing their raw materials or starter things and trying to have that chain. Can you imagine the manpower to go back and say, do this? Now, they just say on their website that I believe in this, and we make each one of our suppliers sign a note that says they're not doing it, and now we find out that supplier is not being truthful with the company that imports these goods. What kind of steps are going to be taken from there? So I want to put the carrot, not the stick, into this problem, and hopefully urge people to seek out that. And it's going to be easier for some companies than for others. Those who import many different goods are going to have a lot harder time complying with this or even tracking some of this, versus those who bring in one type of materials or other. So that's my only concerns with this bill, and respect your no vote.
Mr. Logue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question of the author. Permission to question the author?
Without objection.
Yeah, I'm just curious, are we the only state in the union asking for this type of legislation?
We're the only state of which I'm aware that is pursuing this legislation now, which puts California in a familiar position. Because on an array of measures, California has been the first in the nation, and it's been the catalyst for changes throughout the country that ultimately not only change state policies throughout America, but federal and potentially international policies as well.
Thank you. On my own time. So here we go again. You're right. California is first. It's the first in being among the highest tax in the country. It's the first in having among the highest unemployment rate in the country. And now we're going to be the first in tying the hands of business. And my concern is real simple, is that what kind of liability is this going to put on the manufacturers if they do not have the full disclosure? Will this not open them up to lawsuits? Will this not tie their hands more? Will they be able to compete on a national scale? I'm here to say that I think that if you're going to do this, it should be a federal level bill. I mean, we have absolutely no right to tie the hands of the businesses of California any more than they're already tied. I just think it's typical of California when we are facing a recession to find out and pass as many laws as we can to burden the business community as much as we can to crush their productivity while we're laying off thousands and thousands of teachers. It doesn't add up. I guess next we're going to have them responsible for people who can't educate their kids in China, that should be the manufacturer's fault and cut them off for that too. I think slave labor is outrageous. It should never happen, but this is a police issue, and to ask our businesses to play by different rules than the rest of the nation is just the wrong way to go. I oppose this bill.
Mr. Furutani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question for the field jockey, the person.
Without objection.
Sorry, whatever. Mike, the issue clearly is a critical, important issue.
Absolutely. It's.
Wait a minute, that's not the question.
Oh, sorry.
My local Chamber of Commerce have contacted me, and their concern is that as small companies, small businesses, the difficulty of trying to provide this kind of information, pursue it, is the $100,000 threshold, is that the sort of checks and balance on it for smaller companies? They would like to do it, they just don't know have the wherewithal to do it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Furutani, for the question. Actually, the threshold in the bill is you have to have $100 million of gross receipts for this law to apply to you. If you have less than $100 million of gross receipts, you would not have any obligation under this bill.
Thank
you. Mr. Norby.
I rise in opposition to this, Madam Speaker. In saying this is an important first step, the author is essentially saying, hey, the slippery slope is starting, and this is an important step in this. There are a lot of social pathologies and social ills in the world. They're illegal under American law and mostly under international law and the laws of most countries. Certainly, human slavery is one of them. But if we require companies to disclose what active steps they're taking to combat these, human slavery would not be the only one. Certainly, what are companies doing to combat drug addiction, school dropouts, terrorism, species extinction, child abuse? I mean, the list is endless. So this is an important first step in requiring tons and tons of paperwork for companies to prove a negative, prove that they're not doing something that's illegal, which if they were doing it, they'd be arrested, or to prove that they're doing something to combat something that's illegal, which is really more of a police function than a function of a company. I'm not sure about the $100 million limit. I mean, if this is something that we really need to have burden companies with, I don't know why we'd put a limit on it. Maybe it should be higher, maybe it shouldn't be there at all. I think this is aimed toward certain companies, and if it is, maybe they ought to be named if they are in fact wrongdoers, and if not, they ought to be left alone.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of SB 657. Everyone who's spoken against this bill has prefaced their comments by saying they're opposed to human slavery. And that doesn't surprise me. I doubt if there's a single member on this floor who would stand in support of human slavery. The real jump between, I think, supporters and opponents of this bill is whether we're going to accept the responsibility as legislators and as a state to not just say we condemn human slavery, but we're prepared to do something about it. Mr. Fuhr alluded to testimony that was taken in the Judiciary Committee. This is a problem that unfortunately is epidemic around the world, and what this bill does is it requires companies that are selling products that may be manufactured along the chain using human slavery or people being trafficked for their labor. It requires them to make a good faith effort to understand that. You need only go to the websites of some of these companies who market products by trying to advertise that they are green, that they don't have an adverse environmental impact. That is a positive marketing tool. I wish this legislation weren't necessary, but I'm glad and I applaud the author for giving us this opportunity. It will give these $100 million plus companies not only the incentive, but the requirement to exercise some due diligence to see if the products they are buying are coming from human slavery from slave shacks, from people being denied food, water, basic fundamental human rights. As a state, we should be proud to stand up and support this type of measure. I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Berryhill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, when I see bills coming through like this, given the job losses we've suffered, I'm reminded of an old Jay Giles song, "My Angel is a Centerfold," where when he saw his old girlfriend, he realized he was appalled at what he saw. I too am appalled at what I see on a piece of legislation like this. California, this bill simply helps to enhance California's reputation as a job killer state, as a business unfriendly state. We have got to start being business friendly. You've heard me say it before. We got to roll the red tape out, not the red carpet. This is just another piece of red tape that our businesses have to put up with, which also reminds me of another song. It's another brick on the wall, and pretty soon that wall comes tumbling down because we just can't hold the weight any longer. I urge a no vote.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, I have one fundamental objection to this piece of legislation, and otherwise, but for it, I would be supportive. As was previously stated, it's true. I doubt there's a member on this floor who doesn't feel passionately about ensuring that human rights are respected all over the world in every capacity. But frankly, the problem here is not with that intention. The problem is with the fact that we give unbridled authority to the Attorney General of the state of California. And as Mr. Brown has demonstrated by his unwillingness to take the Prop 8 matter to court and defend the will of the people who voted for it, it is evident to me that he has no idea when it is judicious and non-judicious to engage in the authority given to him by the people. Until he demonstrates some semblance of responsibility for the role in which he is supposed to play for all Californians, not just some, I sincerely doubt it's wise or prudent to give him more authority here. Members, for that reason and that reason alone, I would urge a no vote.
Ms. Saldana.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, California is not going this alone. There are already international agreements by electronic manufacturers, because that's who we're really talking about here. Primarily, we are talking about manufacturing of electronics that rely on certain trace minerals that only occur in certain parts of the world, especially countries in Africa, that engage in horrific slave working conditions. Steve Jobs of Apple has already conceded that they trace the source of these minerals. There's only a few companies we're really talking about here, and there are only a few devices, electronic devices, that I think all of us on this floor are probably using right now, that we probably have concerns about where some of these minerals have come from, that are an essential part of our electronics today. But it is a real problem for children when they are forced to work in horrific conditions, when they are denied money until they complete a certain amount of work. It is the new face of slavery, and it is an ugly face. California is not doing this alone. We are not the first to take this step. We have many manufacturers in this state that are already ahead of our policy. So in this case, we in fact are following existing policy. But I know if I want to make a choice about what I'm purchasing to ensure that it is not harming a community thousands of miles away, I would appreciate that information. And when people talk about making an informed choice, how can I as a consumer make an informed choice without a manufacturer participating in the process of determining where the source of those materials in their product comes from? So this makes sense to support people who want to make a choice of conscience. We have manufacturers already participating in this. Let's just follow the lead that our electronic manufacturers have already established for us and put this into practice for other 100 million plus level companies that are working in electronics trade. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise in opposition to this measure. This isn't just about electronics manufacturers and a few trace minerals mined mainly in the continent of Africa. No, not at all. What we're talking about here is making it a state policy that businesses that manufacture or sell in excess of $100 million in material are now subject to penalties from our Attorney General if they don't comply with this law. Is this really the proper domain of the state of California to put on the companies in this state the responsibilities properly at the Secretary of State's level? And I'm talking about the United States Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, not the California Secretary of State. This is foreign policy. And lest we think that we're just talking about a few trace elements used in the electronics manufacturing process, ladies and gentlemen, I had a meeting a couple of months ago with the Chinese Consul General over the fact that I had written some letters that he deemed impertinent, trying to get released from Laogai, that's Chinese labor camps, 5 women who were unlawfully detained because of their religious beliefs, none of whom was charged with a crime, and all of whom were forced to work brutal hours unless they signed a confession. That material would then make it into California, the material that they produced. My family will tell you that I'm impossible to go shopping for shoes with, and it's not because I can't find the style that I like. It's because I refuse to buy shoes made in the People's Republic of China, because those shoes are often made in slave labor conditions. We know that. This is easily found out. If you look at things like the Amnesty International site, you can find out as a consumer which nations and products are made by people in bad conditions. You don't need a law in the state of California to tell you that. I've done it. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue, and you've seen it, unfortunately, time after time after time in this chamber in the last few weeks, we continue to make California a more and more and more inhospitable place to do business. Is human trafficking reprehensible? Of course. Is slavery wrong? Of course. California was admitted into the Union as a free state. That's part of our heritage. But is it the proper domain of a state legislature to put on the businesses in that state a function that is properly that of the federal Department of State? Ladies and gentlemen, this bill is not worthy of our support, and I urge a no vote.
Mr. Calderon.
Mr. Speaker, members, Madam Speaker, members, I felt I had to rise because I don't think I can support the bill, and I wanted to state on the record why. I want something, if something is practical and the objective can be met, then I think we need to do everything in that regard to stop human trafficking and human slavery. But when we're going to put into play some procedure or some policy which would be difficult to comply with or even become more important than the particular trade or commerce being engaged in the business, I think we got to stop and think about how far we can go legislating morality all over the world. How would we comply, for instance, with a bill that requires all state employees to pay their use tax for every item that they purchase out of state on the internet? First of all, how could we do that without finding a way to enforce it for every non-state employee? Or how could we regulate every state employee from viewing any harmful matter as defined in code on their own time? Because as a state, we don't want to promote that kind of activity. Now, if it's to stop it in the workplace, I think that's achievable. But to do it in the home, I don't. And so give me something that can be complied with that does not become so important that the that the objective is achieved only by destroying the business or the commerce or impeding that business and commerce in a significant way, and I'm willing to vote for that. I'm not sure that I'm just not convinced that this meets that particular test. I think that there are definitions that are very broad, and I think it's be difficult to enforce. I want to vote for something, and I hope we can come up with something that I can vote for, but I don't think I can support this. With all due respect to the author and to the floor author.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Fuhrer. Oh, Mr. Anderson.
I just want to concur. I also rise in opposition, although I want to get there. I want to vote for this. I think that the goals are good goals and should be pursued, but I have an issue with we haven't defined down how far the authority of the AG. And if we could do that, I could easily support this bill, and I want to support this bill, but I can't do it today.
Ms. Yamada.
Madam Speaker and members, I rise in support of SB 657. You know, we've heard a lot of good discussion and dialogue on this issue, but you know, we hear talk about personal responsibility and being able to shop where you'd like to shop and trade in goods that you can bring into your own home without concerns about the source of the labor. But you know, this is a very simple bill in my mind. This is a bill about corporate responsibility, very narrowly focused on those companies that are doing $100 million worth of business in our state. And I think it's a small step in the right direction to bring that kind of responsibility. It's actually a marketing tool for corporations as well. If given a choice, I would think that all of us would shop and trade in goods that we know are prepared without using labor that all of us would find abhorrent. I respectfully ask for your aye vote for corporate responsibility.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Fuhrer, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So I think we can reduce the core of the opposition on this bill to 2 points. The first point that is made is it's too onerous to comply with, too difficult to adhere to what the law would require. Let's review what the law requires. Let's revert to the statute. What this statute requires of a business that has more than $100 million of gross receipts, it requires nothing of businesses that have fewer gross receipts than that, is this: say what you are doing to find out information regarding your supply chains when it comes to illegal trafficking of people. If you are doing nothing, that is all you need to say. The bill does not require that you conduct any of the following types of investigations, but these are examples of the kinds of things that businesses can speak to if they choose to on their websites. Do you conduct audits of your suppliers? Do you have internal accountability for your own employees and contractors when it comes to complying with your own standards? Do you have employees who are, and management for that matter, who are responsible for looking at the supply chains you have and evaluating whether those supply chains might implicate human trafficking? If you are doing none of those things, you only need say, we're not doing any of those things. There is not a single job in the state of California that is at stake if this bill were to become law. Here's what is at stake. What is at stake is a principle that the opponents of this bill often cite when opposing other bills. The principle that's at stake is, shouldn't consumers be given enough information to make an informed choice? Let the marketplace work itself out. We hear that all the time from opponents of this bill. But how can the marketplace be anything close to free when consumers are in the dark regarding this key question? So this bill says, let's confront that. Let's create a marketplace that is truly free by providing consumers, if businesses want to tell them, by providing consumers with some basic information about the source of the goods that they wear and use every day. I will say again, if a business says, I don't engage in any effort to determine the source of our goods, you say that on the website and you are done. You've complied with the law. The other objection raised by several opponents is lawsuits. This is going to create more lawsuits in the state of California. The bill explicitly says that there is no private right of action to enforce this statute. But you have to have something to enforce the statute, right? So the fallback is the public agency, the state's top law enforcement officer, is vested with authority to assure that companies are at least saying, we don't do anything about this. That's the only authority in the statute. So when it comes right down to it, those of you who've asked, let us have a law that can practically be complied with, well, this is a law for you. Businesses merely need to say what they are or are not doing. If they do nothing, it's enough. Those of you concerned about the proliferation of lawsuits in California have nothing to fear from this because no private party can bring a lawsuit under this action. But we can do something that consumers in all our districts are asking, and that is, give us more information so we can make a choice on our own. I urge an aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Fior moves the call. Okay, members, we are going to lift the call on only one bill at this moment. One bill, SB 250. File item 165, SB 250. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Mr. Blumenfield moves the call. File item 130, SB 1350. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 1350 by Senator Kehoe, an act relating to public lands.
Mr. Chesbro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Current law requires state agencies to report detailed information about their land holdings to the Department of General Services. The State Lands Commission has found it extremely difficult and costly to comply because of the unique nature of their lands. In addition, the law requires a record of parcels, but tidelands are not divided into parcels and are subject to tides, sea level rise, and other factors that make it literally impossible to determine boundaries. SB 1350 will save the state money by exempting the public trust tidelands from DGS reporting requirements and tailoring the reporting requirements for school lands. SB 1350 is not only supported by the State Lands Commission, but by the California Association of Port Authorities, Pacific Merchant Shipping Association, and the Port of San Diego. The bill has received bipartisan support. I ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 6. Senate amendments, measure passes. File item 132, SB 194. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 194 by Senator Flores, an act relating to community development.
Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Senate Bill 194 will help to address the conditions that over 1 million California residents live in disadvantaged urban and rural communities. These areas often lack the very basics such as clean water, sewer systems, and sidewalks. And specifically, this bill focuses on one aspect of the problem that they face, making sure that federal infrastructure dollars are targeted to those most in need. Each year, the federal government sends to California millions of dollars directly to communities under the Community Development Block Grant Program. And the CDBD dollars are an important source of investment for infrastructure improvements. Although communities are eligible for the dollars based largely on the extent of poverty in those communities, all too often the funds are used in ways that do not necessarily benefit lower income households. This bill will ensure that unincorporated communities are given reasonable and timely access to information about the CDBG program, assistance with the application process, and technical assistance with applications. I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Mr. Furtani.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Permission to read?
Without objection.
I received a letter from Mayor Bob Foster from Long Beach about a concern with SB 194. In his letter, he says, this legislation inserts the state into a very effective federal program that gives funding directly to cities. Long Beach believes these new state restrictions would hinder the effectiveness traditionally facilitated through the relative flexibility of CDBG programs and services throughout the city. As such, this legislation would be a disservice to entitlement communities statewide. Long Beach is proud that these programs and services in the city funded through the same dollars already meet many of the regulations proposed by the bill. The city consistently expends over 75% of its funds on programs and services for low-income residents. We believe there is a healthy balance of regulation and relative flexibility currently present in these programs. Just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Arambula moves the call. File item 133, SB 1413. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 1413 by Senator Leno, an act relating to schools.
Mr. Torlakson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this bill has to do with providing drinking water in our schools, to providing tap water in the meal areas. Some schools have concern that existing contracts with bottled water providers would prohibit them or impede them from promoting this. The governor is sponsoring this legislation as well. Urge an aye vote for water in our schools.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 45, noes 13. Measure passes. File item 135, SB 1080. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 1080 by the Senate Committee on Public Safety, an act relating to non-substantive reorganization of deadly weapon statutes.
Mr. Amiano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. SB 1080 is authored by the Senate Public Safety Committee. This bill is a companion measure to SB 1115, also authored by the committee, which is already on the governor's desk. These bills implement a recommendation of the Law Revision Commission to make the statutes governing control of deadly weapons more user-friendly and readily understandable without changing their substance. Let me emphasize that this bill makes no substantive change to deadly weapon laws, which means everybody can Won Chung tonight. Both bills have strong bipartisan support, no opposition, and no votes to date. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 61, no 0. Measure passes. File item 137, SB 965. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 965 by Senator DeZonia, an act relating to transportation.
Ms. Galgiani.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members.
In January of this year, the High Speed Rail Authority received an American Recovery and Reinvestment Act grant of $2.25 billion for high-speed rail, nearly twice as much as any other state. SB 965 creates a process for appropriation of the funds and for the authority to use these federal funds to fully take advantage of the job creation potential for high-speed rail. SB 965 also provides some needed legislative oversight by requiring the authority to submit to the legislature an expenditure plan for those funds. It has enjoyed bipartisan support. It was approved unanimously in the Assembly Transportation Committee. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 53, noes 7. Measure passes. File item 138, SB 1029. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 1029 by Senator Yee, an act relating to public health.
Mr. Chesbro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. SB 1029 extends and expands the current pilot program established by SB 1159 until 2018. It also allows pharmacies the discretion to sell up to 30 syringes without a prescription. This bill will help prevent against the spread of AIDS, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and other costly blood-borne diseases. It will save the state millions of dollars in health care costs. The bill has widespread support from pharmacists, retailers, health professionals, major medical organizations, and advocates. I encourage your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 17. Measure passes. File item 140, SB 1237. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 1237 by Senator Padilla, an act relating to public health.
Mr. Fletcher.
Members, SB 1237 will increase patient safety by implementing safeguards that will reduce the risk of over-radiation. It will require an accurate record of radiation dosages administered to patients to better treat the occurrences of one-time radiation overdoses, as well as the cumulative effects of over-radiation. This bill has enjoyed unanimous support in 3 Assembly committees, and I would request your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 58, noes 2. Measure passes. File item 141, SB 1266. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 1266 by Senator Liu, an act relating to inmates.
Ms. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill deals with low-risk, nonviolent offenders, specifically women and primary caregivers of children. It authorizes the Secretary of CDCR to put them in alternative custody, still custody, I want to repeat, as long as they have not been convicted of a serious, violent, or sex crime. By placing these women on electronic monitoring or in a transitional care facility or a drug treatment home, not sending them to the Grand Tetons, we can keep them in their children's lives, keep the children out of the child welfare system, and reduce the likelihood that mother or child will begin a revolving door relationship with the criminal justice system. The fact is, children whose mothers are in prison are more likely to commit a crime and go to jail. Fortunately, we have a chance here today to break that cycle for both mother and child by keeping them in each other's lives. This bill can do a lot of good, and I urge your aye vote.
Mr. Nielsen.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I would urge a no vote. It's kind of a stay out of jail ticket for a very select class of criminal offenders that includes men, not just women. It rewards escape. If you escape from this assignment, shall I say, this placement,
there is no consequence. It defines anyone in the class to be qualified who would be a primary caregiver, which means anyone over 17 with whom a child has lived for the majority of the last year, who has physical custody at the time of arrest. That's a pretty loose definition, and that's for man or woman. It makes no suggestion as to the quality of care from that person, parent, caregiver, and I can assure you that many do not get much care from these individuals. This very day, a major parole sweep in Los Angeles garnered 300 parolees, a lot of guns and a lot of drugs, and 11 children were put in protective custody. And I have no doubt that some of those may have been of this class that we're talking about in this bill. It does, again, reward negative and criminal behavior for a very large class with a very loose restriction on what that class would be. Again, it is a compromise of justice. The victims of those individuals do deserve and warrant some justice. But the biggest problem is creating a select class of individuals who would be exempt to a large degree for the consequences of their victimization of society, and even those children, which may be their very presence with this individual, gives them that free ticket that no one else will get.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I do rise in opposition to this measure as well. I'll be the first one to admit that we have problems in our criminal justice system right now. There are many problems. Overcrowding is at least one of them. The resources needed to be doing things is another. But this is a system of justice. It's not because your gender, your social economic class, whatever. Part of this justice system is to prevent people from doing crimes. And hopefully when they do a crime, they have their payment back to society, to the victims, and part of this. This would circumvent that system for a select class of individuals. Now, next, if you start down this road, do you pick out the single fathers that are taking care of their children? How about the single bread earners? How about other people with different situations in the background and past? Where do you stop with this? The law is supposed to be blind to everything. Race, color, creed, background is supposed to be justice. We got to administer it fairly across the board, a certain sentence for a certain crime. Hopefully, when people believe in that sentence, that they will be deterred from doing those crimes. Or we could get them, for those first-time offenders, into the system where we can rehabilitate them and hopefully keep them from becoming worse criminals later on. Those first-time drug offenders who starts to have to rob to keep their drug habit going, let's get them in the system. Let's have the punishment be sitting in county jail for a while so they learn from that, not to go back in their home surroundings. They're all very sympathetic to their personal needs at their households, at homes, who they have to take care of. But again, where do you stop and where do you draw that line? The justice is supposed to be blind. We're supposed to be treating everyone equally. I ask for your no vote.
Mr. Bell.
Madam Speaker and members, I think it's totally appropriate that we look at ways of preventing recidivism. This type of program is actually a program that we established in Santa Clara County over 10 years ago. So there is a track record, Madam Speaker and members, there is a track record of success. The program in Santa Clara County has received awards for keeping people from going back into prison. That's what this is all about. It puts the families together, so the primary motivation of staying out of prison, the children are joined with the parent, and you can guarantee that the recidivism will go down, and it will save the taxpayers money. The House on the Hill in Santa Clara County was actually a program that was involving the private sector that actually raised millions of dollars. And they have a committee of business people, and that program is continually supported by the private sector. Business knows that this is the right thing to do. I urge and I vote on this bill because I think that the state of California ought to at least take our low-level offenders and attempt to do some creative things to keep people out of prison. Thank you.
Ms. Evans.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this bill as a co-author of the bill. Members, when we lump all offenders together with the worst offenders and treat them all the same, we do justice to no one, including our own society. These programs, the Community Prisoner Mother Program and the Family Foundation programs, enable women to serve their sentence, pay their debt to society, obtain critically needed, responsive, and trauma-informed wraparound treatment services, including substance abuse treatment, parenting education, life skills education, and on and on. These programs are extremely effective. They have a 12 to 14% recidivism rate as compared to an average of 42% recidivism rate. So they are effective. They do their job. They return these women to society, and they have a very, very low recidivism rate. In other words, they save us money. Like alternative custody proposals, these community-based correctional programs have been designed to support female inmates. They have specific needs, and their children, and they have saved countless lives and countless children from the foster care system. The children of these female inmates are powerful motivators for rehabilitation, and mothers need the opportunity to change their lives. And not only do mothers, but our society needs those women as members, as productive members of our society, as well as their children. I urge your aye vote on this bill.
Ms. Saldana.
There are a few things more telling in this House than how we respond differently to laws affecting children. We are very concerned about protecting children from crime, and yet when we can prevent crimes from happening, we see the great divide occur. The children of these women who see their mothers overcoming their incarceration are much less likely to become offenders themselves. So if those of you believe that justice is not done by allowing women to reunite with their children, then think about the children whose lives are improved by reuniting with their mothers. In study after study, when children see not only their mother but their father enter the criminal justice system, their chances of entering the system expand exponentially. So here we're saying we're giving children a chance to see their parents, either mother or father, overcome those challenges. And yet there's apparently a number of people in this chamber who are saying, forget about those kids. Forget about the chance for those children to see that their parents can overcome the challenges they faced and work not freely but in an incarcerated state, but interacting daily with their children. I don't know how many of you have met some women who have been in prison. It is a recurring cycle. They lack education, they lack opportunity, and it's no surprise, but their own family, their parents, often were in the system before they then became part of the system. Let's break the cycle. That's all we're saying here. Let's stop breaking up families. We can't afford it. Our foster care programs are on the verge of bankruptcy, and yet we're saying now that parents who are motivated to reunite with their children, we're not going to allow that to continue. This is a common sense program. It helps the children. And if you don't care about the adults, if you're ready to write off the adults, at least give their children a chance to see that their parents are in their lives, committed to their well-being, and keep their children from repeating the same mistakes. I ask for your aye vote.
Mr. Arambula.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Permission to ask the author or the floor manager a question?
Without objection.
My reading of the bill is that it's narrowly prescribed and that the individuals that would be covered would have no current nor prior violent or serious crimes, and that they be deemed to be low risk. Would you describe the intended population that this bill would cover?
the intended population is women and primary caregivers, but they're also people who have never been convicted of a violent, serious, or sex-related crime. They have never plea bargained down from anything serious. So the majority of the women that are in prison for these very low-level crimes have committed prostitution, crimes of welfare fraud, and drug crimes, nonviolent crimes, and that is who is the population.
Ms. Salas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise right now because I'm unprepared to vote for this bill, and I'll tell you why. Even as it was described that these were low-risk offenders, women that had been involved in prostitution and drug abuse and welfare fraud, I was a social work major, and my practicum was done in an adoption agency. I was working with a population of women that fit this description, that were using drugs, that were involved in prostitution, and that had not been arrested before, but let me tell you the horrors that their children suffered at the neglect and the abuse of their mothers. So unless I see in this bill, which I don't, the assurance is that the child is not going into a situation where they're in a dysfunctional household that is actually doing them more harm than good and being with that parent, I am unprepared to support this bill today.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Ms. Lowenthal, you may close.
Thank you very much. I want to respond to Ms. Salas. This bill is only for people who can be rehabilitated. And here in this chamber, we talk repeatedly about inadequate rehabilitation taking place in the prison. This bill is about continuing custody, but giving women and primary caregivers an opportunity to improve that home, to improve their behavior, so that when they are ultimately released, they will, in fact, have a nurturing home. I also want to point out that escape from this alternative custody is a misdemeanor. They will automatically be back in prison. So this is a bill, members, that keeps children out of foster care. It stops the cycle of incarceration. It keeps people in custody, and it gives them a chance for rehabilitation. I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Ms. Lowenthal moves the call. Okay, members, I am prepared to lift the calls on all the bills, and we'll go in order on the computer. Lifting the calls on the bills. We have 15 items on call. File item 14, AB 1858. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 44, no 23. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 28, AB 2758. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 48, noes 23. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 165, SB 250. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Blumenfield moves the call. File item 136, SB 392. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the votes. Ayes 66, no 0. Measure passes. File item 52, AB 1648. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 68, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 58, AB 2147. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 50, noes 17. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 61, AB 2289. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 48, noes 21. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 56, AB 2060. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 71, no 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 51, AB 1640. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 71, noes 1. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 53, AB 1701. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 51, noes 21. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 60, AB 2263. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 73, noes 0. Senate amendments are concurred in. File item 126, SB 1304. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 27. Measure passes. File item 126, SB 657. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 42, noes 24. Measure passes. File item 132, SB 194. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 30. Measure passes. File item 141, SB 1266. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Ms. Lowenthal moves the call. We've got adjourn in memories today. We've got 4 adjourn in memories. Ms. Harkey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This adjourn in memory is my Chief of Staff, Michael Babawal. His mother passed away last week. Or actually, I guess it's been a little bit over a week now, but he's been back with us since Monday. So please join me in adjourning in memory of Chris Babawal, a native Californian who made her journey on Tuesday, August 17th, to God, and at the age of only 60 years old. She leaves behind her husband Roger of 35 years, daughter Shelley, son Roger Michael, who we know, daughter-in-law Crystal, and grandson Roger Michael III. Mrs. Babawal was a dedicated wife, proud and loving mother and grandmother. She enjoyed spending time with her husband, daughter, son, daughter-in-law, grandson, and dog. She had a passion for learning about other languages and cultures, reading, listening to books on tape, decorating, cooking, health, knitting, and travel. Mrs. Babawal was found in June of this year that she had progressive form of colon cancer. She had a B.S. in aeronautic engineering, a B.A. in early childhood development, and an M.A. in secondary education. She also had certificates in English as a second language from San Jose State and held a California teaching certificate in adult education supervision and coordination. She was a highly valued person to her community. An educator for over 25 years, Ms. Babawal taught individuals from preschool to the postgraduate level and provided training in corporate settings. In the public school sector, she was responsible for the development of the ESL, which is the, I will get that, anyway, for the development of ESL, parenting classes, several workplace and family literacy ESL programs that are still in use. Mrs. Babawal was trained to develop listening and speaking tests using the ARELS method by the University of Oxford local examinations, a department within the University of Oxford, England, and the Association of Recognized English Language Schools. The Association of Recognized English Language Schools speaking and listening examinations were among the earliest creators of semi-direct listening and speaking tests in the world. She ventured into business English testing by developing a needs analysis process called functional language and task analysis. In 1992, she founded Babawal & Associates, Inc., which provided ARELS, American English Examinations and Certificate Programs. She was made an Esquire of the University of Oxford when she signed a partnership agreement with them in 1994. Babawal & Associates, Inc. and University of Oxford Partnership Agreement was the first for-profit partnership at the University of Oxford in their 900-year history. A private funeral was held for the immediate family on Thursday, August 19, 2010, and we will be saying a Mass in her honor at our local cathedral. Thank you so much.
Mr. Valines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise for Dr. Steve Parks to adjourn in his memory. Dr. Parks moved to Fresno and began his surgical career at Valley Medical Center. He was heavily involved in surgical education and taught generations of surgeons in the Fresno area. Since 1982, he was the chairman of the surgery and program director for surgical residency. He received the American College of Surgeons Committee on Trauma's Millennium Commitment Award, the Advanced Trauma Life Support Meritorious Service Award, and the Society of Trauma Nurses Service Award. Dr. Parks was recognized with the Stephen N. Parks Endowed Chair of Surgery in 2009. It's established to continue his legacy of service and surgical education in Fresno. He was a very involved family man. He was a fantastic doctor, obviously, in our local area, and his passions were actually cheering for the Fresno State Bulldogs and karaoke, which many here can identify with. We will miss him. He's got an extended family in Fresno, and the whole community was better for his life served there, and we just wanted to adjourn in his memory. Thank you.
Mr. Calderon?
No, I'm sorry.
Mr. Gaines?
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise today to adjourn in memory of Eric Nelson. Eric passed away last week after a battle with cancer after having been in remission for 5 years. He was 49 years old. Eric was the owner of Sathe Electric for 16 years and an ardent supporter of the merit shop industry, having belonged to the Western Electrical Contractors Association since 1997 and serving as their president in 2009. Eric and his wife were also very active in their community, but his abiding passion was to encourage and support other young men and women to join his profession. Eric is survived by his wife of 23 years, Colleen, and his daughter, Samantha. Eric's leadership, dedication, and friendship will be greatly missed by all of his colleagues at WECA and those of us that personally knew him as a friend. Thank you.
And Mr. DeLeon?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to adjourn in the memory of Rene Lapiani. Rene was born and raised in the east side of San Jose in an extended and loving Italian family. Along with her family, she was an active member of St. John Viviani Parish. She graduated from San Jose State University with a degree in recreation administration and stayed in her hometown, dedicating her career to public service. Highlights in her career include serving as youth coordinator and physical education teacher at St. Martin of Tours and as a program coordinator for Girl Scouts of Santa Clara County. She also will be remembered for all her work for the Relay for the Life at the American Cancer Society, as was articulated in a very eloquent manner by the principal of Notre Dame High School, the high school where my daughter currently attends. Mary Beth Riley had a few words that she shared with the audience. Renee was a woman who was the embodiment of energy and love. She knew the essence of her students to their core. She was a member of the, quote, Grandma Bragging Rights group. She was an awesome listener and told great stories about Cooper Miles and other Notre Dame students. She was a friend to everyone, and her outlook in life was that she was very easy and laid back. This is a big loss for the girls at Notre Dame High School. This is a woman, when I took my daughter as a freshman in 9th grade to Notre Dame High School, she greeted us with a big smile. She was always very helpful. It's a very, very sad day for the girls at Notre Dame High School, and I thank you, colleagues, for allowing me to adjourn in her memory. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, members. Please bring the names to the desk to be printed in the journal. We have some committee hearings following adjournment today. Health Committee will meet in the Rules Committee room. Local Government will meet in room 444. Public Safety will meet in room 126. Revenue and Taxation will meet in room 437. And the Transportation Committee will meet in room 4202. Tomorrow session, we will start at 9 a.m. sharp. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, request unanimous consent to waive the final notice requirement to allow local government committee to meet and hear AB 602 by Mr. Fuhr pending referral. Oh, no. Strike that. Request unanimous consent to waive the final notice requirement to allow local government committee to meet and hear AB 602 on tomorrow. Oh, I'm sorry, today. Today, upon the call of the chair in a room to be determined, to be 447.
Without objection. Okay, members, we've got two bills on call. I'm prepared to lift the calls on the two bills. File item 165, SB 250. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 33, noes 40. Measure fails. Mr. Blumenfield asks for reconsideration. Notices reconsideration. File item 141, SB 1266. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 41, noes 26. Measure passes. I'm ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Calderon moves and Mr. Hagman seconds that this House stands adjourned until Friday, August 27th at 9 a.m. Quorum call is lifted. Huh? Continue all motions.
Garrick, vote change. File item 67, AB 2456, from aye to no.
Garrick, Assembly Bill 2456, aye to no.
Smythe, vote change. Item number 11.